You open your phone. Someone from school just got promoted. Someone else just launched a business. A person you barely remember just published a book. You put the phone down, and a quiet, familiar feeling settles in. Not envy, exactly. More like a question you don't say out loud. What happened to the version of me that was supposed to be doing that too? Almost everyone feels this at some point, no matter who you are or what your life looks like from the outside. You know you could be doing more with your life, but somehow you're not. A plan you never started. A skill you kept saying you'd learn. A business idea that stayed in your notes. A book you bought and never finished. And the strange part is, you don't necessarily feel like a failure. You feel like you're waiting for more confidence, more time, the right opportunity, the right version of yourself. And somehow, that day never comes. To make this easier to watch from the outside, instead of just feeling it, let's call this person Ethan. He's 31, and from the outside, nothing looks obviously wrong. A job, friends, a place to live. But there's something he doesn't talk about. He feels like he's wasting himself. Every few months, he gets excited about something new. A business idea, learning guitar, getting fit. And for a few weeks, he believes this could finally be the thing that changes everything. Then life gets busy. The excitement fades, and he tells himself he'll come back to it later. He always does. Later is the word Ethan built his life around. Maybe you know that word better than you'd like to admit. Wasted potential doesn't always look like failing completely. Sometimes it looks like doing just enough to survive, but never enough to become who you could be, which is exactly what makes it so hard to recognize. There's no single moment your potential disappears. It happens quietly. One unfinished project, one postponed decision, one reasonable sounding excuse, and then another, until years have passed and you're still talking about the person you're going to become. Here's the uncomfortable question. What if having potential is actually part of the problem? Potential has one enormous advantage over achievement. It can never fail. If you never publish the book, it can still be brilliant. If you never start the business, it can still become successful. Your potential stays perfect because reality never gets the chance to test it. And that builds a strange trap. You can spend years protecting an imaginary future while quietly sacrificing the real one. So why do capable people keep postponing the exact things they say they want? The problem may not be that you don't believe you can succeed. It may be that you're afraid of finding out what happens when you finally try. There's a reason people say you have so much potential. It sounds like a compliment, but hear it long enough and it stops describing what you might become and starts describing who you believe you are. Ethan built his identity around possibility instead of proof. As long as he stayed in the planning stage, he could keep saying, I could do that, and nobody could prove him wrong. This is where perfectionism turns dangerous. Not the kind that makes you work harder, but the kind that makes you avoid starting, because the first real attempt might expose your limits. You don't call it fear. You call it preparation. One more tutorial, better equipment, starting Monday. Monday becomes next month. You even feel productive doing it, thinking about the goal, imagining the future version of yourself, but none of that requires confronting reality. And reality is where potential actually becomes measurable. This is where psychologist Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy matters. His work showed that believing you can handle a task, not just having the raw ability, is what determines whether you actually start, push through difficulty, and recover from setbacks. Knowing you could do something isn't the same as believing you can survive the process of doing it. Ethan had plenty of ability. What he lacked was evidence. Evidence that he could start something, struggle, look mediocre, and keep going anyway. Every unfinished project gave him the same quiet reward. He got to preserve the fantasy and avoid the test. But there's a cost. Eventually, the question changes from, what could I become? To, why haven't I become it yet? And that question gets harder to answer the longer you wait. Remember that scroll from the beginning? This is where it turns dangerous. Social psychologist Leon Festinger called this social comparison, our tendency to measure our own worth against the people around us, especially people we see as similar to ourselves. A former classmate builds a career, a friend starts a business, and their progress becomes a mirror. Not because you want them to fail, but because their success forces you to look at your own unfinished life. Was I really capable of more? Or did I just like believing I was? If your identity is built on potential instead of proof, someone else's achievement can feel like a personal threat. Their success doesn't just say they did it. Your mind reads it as you could have done it too. So the brain looks for an exit. You tell yourself you're not interested anymore, or that they had advantages you didn't. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's also just convenient, because accepting that you might have done more means accepting something harder, that you're responsible for what happens next. Potential has an expiration date, not because your ability disappears, but because the longer you live in I could, the harder it becomes to live with I didn't. Ethan started noticing it everywhere. The notebook, the guitar he never learned, the course he never finished. None of it looked serious on its own. And that's the problem. It's rarely one massive decision. It's 1,000 tiny ones, each pointing the same direction, each buying a little relief. Psychologically, that relief matters. When you avoid something uncomfortable, the anxiety drops, and your brain notices. Avoidance worked. So next time the fear shows up, you avoid it again and again, until it stops feeling like a choice at all. That's when potential becomes a prison, because now you're protecting an identity instead of building a life. Ethan eventually realized he wasn't afraid of hard work. He was afraid of evidence. Evidence that he wasn't perfect, that he might fail, that the person he imagined becoming might be different from who he actually was. But there was another possibility he'd never considered. What if discovering your limits isn't the end of your potential, but the beginning of something more useful? Once you stop protecting the fantasy, you can finally work with reality. Find out what you're actually good at, what needs practice, what's genuinely worth pursuing. Less exciting than believing you could become anything. Far more powerful. Ethan didn't wake up with a new personality or a perfect plan. He just made one decision. Stop asking, what could I become? And start asking, what am I willing to do today? Potential lives in the future, a very comfortable place to keep your dreams. Action lives in the present, which is the only place you can actually build anything. So he picked one project, not the most impressive one, just one he'd abandoned, and finished it. Then started another. Failed, adjusted, started again. He was finally collecting evidence that he could keep going after the excitement disappeared, that being bad at something didn't mean he should quit. Slowly, the word potential lost its power over him because he no longer needed to imagine who he could become. He was becoming someone through repetition. Your potential isn't your achievement. It's only a possibility. And possibilities feel good because they don't demand anything from you. Reality asks you to choose, to risk looking ordinary, to start badly, to discover some dreams weren't meant for you. But that's not failure. That's information. And information is what turns potential into something real. So, if there's something you've been postponing, don't ask whether you're talented enough. And don't wait to feel confident. Ask a simpler question. What is one thing I can actually finish? Because the danger was never that you have no potential. It's spending so much time protecting it that you never give it a chance to become real. Potential says, I could. A life says, I did. Next time you open your phone and see someone else's promotion, someone else's launch, someone else's finished book, notice the feeling, but don't stop there. Ask what you're going to do with it. If this made you think about something you've been postponing, don't ignore that. It might be the part of your life that's been waiting for you to finally begin. Subscribe for more videos breaking down the psychology behind the patterns we repeat.